Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. We are excited to have the Alumni Association Career Network and at work today. Our guest speaker today is one of our alums, class of 2002, Christina, and you're going to be able to introduce yourself, correct? I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we get started. You're the former New York City DOE, correct? High school principal turned founder of Head, Heart, Hands Consulting and an award-winning education and equity consultancy.
Yeah.
So we're excited to have you here, and I would love the opportunity to give you the time to talk to our guests today about who you are and what you do. And we are just so grateful that you joined us here today to share some wisdom with our alumni. So,
Thank you
Christina,
so much for the invite. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if it's working.
it's perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So, thank you everybody for joining us today. I am going to be presenting the Discover Your Ikigai Walking Boldly in Your Purpose lunch and learn session for you. You're going to learn how to marry your personal essence with your professional excellence to pursue a more passion filled, purpose driven life that provides a foundation for flourishing. So, first, a little bit more about me. If you don't know me, my name is Christina Farinacci-Roberts. I always like to introduce myself as the proud daughter of a Korean immigrant tiger mom and an Italian American veteran dad. I'm also a first generation college graduate who went on to become one of the youngest New York City high school principals and eventually the founder of an award winning education and equity consultancy, Head, Heart, Hands Consulting. I had a nice, thriving business for a few years. What actually prompted me into entrepreneurship after 10 years of serving as a principal, both downstate in Brooklyn and upstate here in the capital region, was that my mom was diagnosed with the beginning stages of Alzheimer's back in March of 2017. And, I'd been hustling and grinding for 10 years as a principal. My son was almost two, and I just found myself feeling, the pressures of the sandwich generation, having an older parent to care for, having a younger child to care for. And so I wound up telling my board, you need to find a replacement. I don't have another job lined up. I don't have a plan B. I do still have a mortgage for which I am the primary breadwinner. And so that is what led me to start my consultancy. And so I was very fortunate in that first full year. I was able to actually out earn my principal salary. And then a few years later, the pandemic hit, and literally my business went down to zero in a weekend. That is not hyperbole. All the schools had shut down, budgets were slashed, teachers were being laid off. So, rightfully so, nobody really cared about any boutique educational consultancies. And I found myself having to make a pivot like many other people during that time. I wound up partnering with my best friend since second grade, who's also a child of immigrants. She's Nigerian American. She's a former corporate health and wellness executive. And so we wound up starting a pretend podcast called The Wild Wild West of Adulting. We amassed a small but mighty subscribership of 10 people, but one of those people happened to be a global head of people for a global legal services company. And she wanted some wellness initiatives and some diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and asked if we would partner to pitch something to the firm. And I was like, that's genius. We're going to create a wide framework where we integrate wellness, inclusion, diversity, and equity to promote greater individual and organizational flourishing. And so in September of 2020, that was the catalyst to our joint venture, which is now called W.I.D.E Dynamic Dialogues. And in the work that I do with whether it's educators, whether it's executives. I also work with other entrepreneurs on how to leverage their intellectual capital over their human capital to create more scalable, sustainable, and satisfying businesses. All of that is encapsulated in what I call my Solarized leadership model, which is about redesigning the future of work and transforming work into a labor of love and workplaces into communities of care and workforces into guilds of glory that can yield greater results, retention, and revenue. So that is a little bit more about me and my journey. And now we're going to take a quick minute to do a breathing exercise. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you pretend you're in the middle of a rainforest, but what we are going to do is just take 5 full inhales and exhales. On the inhale, I want you to expand your belly, and on the exhale, I want you to contract your belly. And just take this moment to kind of get settled into your seat. So make sure your feet are firmly planted on the ground. You can take your palms, place them right on your thighs. I want you to be specifically conscious of the space between your ears and your shoulders, because this is where we tend to hold a lot of undue tension. So just rolling them down and back, pretending there's a little string holding the crown of your head up. You can keep your eyes open or you can close them, but we're going to inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if your eyes were closed, you can flutter them open. I always like to do the breathing exercise, no matter if I'm doing a virtual event, an in-person event, doesn't matter if I'm with students or senior execs. Sometimes we just need that minute to not think about what we just rushed from, all the things we have to do after the session, and just be present in this moment. Also, sometimes that's like the only 60 seconds you get of your own piece. So hopefully you enjoyed that and you're ready to focus more now. Now, as I shared before, I'm a veteran educator by trade. And so before I go into the learning objectives, I kind of want to just present some enduring understandings. If you leave here with nothing else, I hope that these beliefs will be embedded into your heart space. So the first one is that you are a human being, not a human doing. So who you are determines what you do and not the other way around. We live in a world that constantly tells us we're only as good as our productivity. And connected to that, I also want to reaffirm that you are your why and not your what. So you're defined by your purpose and not your achievement. Now, that's not to discount or dismiss the significance of the titles we might achieve, or the salaries we might be able to earn. But again, in a world that kind of wants to tell you you're only as good as your most recent accomplishment, it can sometimes diminish the broader sense of who we are and what we have to offer the world. Thirdly, I want you to think about and believe that you have been gifted with unique talents and a calling, and what you do with them is your gift back to source, however you define source, and the rest of the world. So just remembering, you are this unique combination of your lived experiences, your learned expertise, your legit essence. There's no other you on the planet, and therefore you can contribute in a way that nobody else can. Next, we have that you are worthy of the life that you desire. You have a birthright for love, joy, peace, and prosperity. I think this is an important one to remember, because oftentimes we actually sell ourselves short and we stop ourselves before we even have a chance to flourish, because we actually don't believe that we deserve to have these different things. And so just really, really believing that and affirming that for yourself. And then lastly, I would love for you to hold this to be true for yourself, that you can create and have a hashtag life by design, because I truly believe that your dreams were placed in you for you to manifest. And so before we go into the learning objectives, I'd actually love to hear a little bit from you as the audience. So there's going to be a Zoom poll that pops up, and there are 3 statements that I'd like you to just identify which you feel describes you best on the scale of strongly disagreeing all the way to strongly agreeing. And the first one is, to what degree does the statement, "I know my deeper purpose," resonate with you? Okay. once you fill that one out, if you can also ask yourself the degree to which the statement, I am able to regularly leverage my passions, gifts, and purpose in my current profession or business. And then lastly, to what degree do you feel a push and pull between your personal life and your work life? So let's give you maybe like another 30 seconds to share your responses. Um, and I want you to know that no matter where you fall on the spectrum of these questions, today's session is designed to help further advance you in each of these areas. So as I'm looking here, we're at 84% of you have completed all three questions. Oh, now we're to 91%. We're almost at 100%. But as I'm looking at the data coming in, it looks like a little over a quarter of you, about 28% of those of you who shared your responses actually feel that you either agree or strongly agree with the fact that you know your deeper purpose. There's about a third of you, 33%, that are kind of like neither agree nor disagree. So you're somewhere still kind of figuring it out. And then there's actually a pretty significant chunk of folks on here, about 41%, that are saying, I actually don't really feel like I know my deeper purpose. And so I definitely believe that after this session, you will be closer to being able to understand that. And even for those of you who already feel like you kind of know it very well, we'll be able to see if we can help you to really live that out and leverage it more throughout the session. Next, we have, let's see. So next we have, to what degree do you feel that you're able to regularly leverage your passions and gifts and purpose? So this is almost the same. You've got 28% that are saying agree or strongly agree. You've got 30% that neither agree nor disagree, and then 41% that don't really feel like you're able to regularly live out your purpose and use your passions and gifts at work. So again, I'm excited to be able to share this session with you because I think it's definitely going to help with that. And then lastly, this idea of, who here feels like that push and pull between the personal life and the work life. So this is a whopping, oh my gosh, let's see, 63% of you either agree or strongly agree with that. About 18% of you neither agree nor disagree. And then only 19% of you say that you don't really feel that push or pull as much. I'll share those results really quickly so you can see them yourself as well. So thank you so much for participating. Again, I think the good news here is nobody is alone in whatever you feel you're at with these three different areas, but also today's session is going to help with that. So moving right along. Okay, so today's learning objectives. We're going to understand the Japanese concept of Ikigai and how it can serve as a tool for deeper reflection and greater results. We're also going to answer the 4 major Ikigai questions and determine how they can help you pursue your own passion-filled, purpose-driven life. We're going to also explore the 4 Ikigai intersections and how they can provide insights on your mission, vocation, profession, and passion. We'll also learn the elements of the Solarized leadership model and the WIDE framework that result in greater individual and collective flourishing. And then lastly, we'll identify your top priorities and next steps that will help you to take aim and lead with greater agency, confidence, and ease. So before I move forward, I want to kind of ground today's session in understanding how our past experiences coupled with emerging developments impact our lives and well-being. So we are now 4 years out from this trifecta of a global pandemic, an economic downturn, and a slew of social injustices that arguably have been taking place for eons, but at that time kind of had both a national and a global spotlight. And everybody was sort of navigating these 3 major experiences at the same time. And one of the sort of results of that was that there was, we talked about the great resignation, there was like the great reawakening, and people started to actually question if the way we had been conducting our lives and and the workplace were actually conducive to people flourishing? And I think there was a resounding no to that question. And so we were able to see folks kind of decide, maybe I don't want to do this thing anymore, and completely switch career paths. Or maybe they wanted to go from working a W-2 job to being an entrepreneur and starting their own business. Some people had that decision made for them, right? If you got laid off and you had to kind of maybe reinvent yourself, or expand the type of work that you are doing. But I think what we also recognize, aside from maybe those purpose driven things, was also like the pleasure side of things. Like, am I actually enjoying and experiencing life to its fullest? So I'm hoping that today's session will help to pull all of this together and drive us more towards living that passion filled, purpose driven life. So, now for the meat and potatoes, we've got Ikigai. If you haven't heard of this, this is a Japanese concept, and it's basically roughly translated into a reason to live, right? Or a reason to get up in the morning. So, Iki refers to life, and Gai refers to value or worth. So, Ikigai reaffirms that we all have this deeper purpose in existing. And so, by exploring the four questions in this diagram, we can increase our level of flourishing by finding greater freedom, fulfillment, and flow in our lives. So the first question is, what do you love? Second question is, what are you good at? Third question is, what can you be paid for? And the fourth question is, what does the world need? So I've kind of recoined these our personal zones of joy, genius, income, and impact. Now, what I have found when I've worked with clients is that sometimes, as great as those four questions are, they can kind of be overwhelming. So I'm going to share a few sub questions that can kind of help spark your thoughts in these different areas. So when you are asked the question, "What do you love?" I want you to think about, maybe, what would you do for a living if money were no object? Right? That's usually an indication that if you were going to do something and not get paid for it and still want to do it, that is something that you love. Also, I want you to think about, what do you enjoy doing when you have free time? So as soon as you have, the weekend, or as soon as you clock out, are there certain things that you just really enjoy doing with your time? That is probably also an indication of something that you love. And then lastly, what do you tend to always want to learn more about? So sometimes it's not necessarily even our love of something doesn't have to just be the things that we do. It can be some of the things that we know or understand. So those are some three sub questions under what do you love. Next, I would want you to think about, when it comes to what are you good at. First is, what did you excel in at school with ease? So this is what I would consider your like zone of excellence, right? These are the things that you just naturally have an inclination or a skill set or a talent at. Then the next question is, what have you become an expert in over the years? This might be more of your zone of excellence, right? Something that you've studied for a long period of time. Maybe it didn't totally come naturally to you, but with your own grit and work ethic, you were able to develop certain skills. And then lastly, we have, what do others consider you the quote unquote go to person for? And when it comes to things about what you're good at, I want you to think beyond just traditional like job skills or degrees that you have. I want you to think about, are you great at baking? Are you great at listening to problems and giving people advice? Are you great at styling an outfit? Are you great at party planning? Like, think broadly about your skill sets and what you're good at. And then next we have, what can you be paid for? So um first, the obvious is, what do you have a degree in and or a certificate in? This is probably the reason why you decided to study that subject matter, was so that you could get a job, right? Then you also have, what do you have an extreme talent in that solves a problem? So sometimes those might be still aligned to your formal studies, but it could be things that are outside of that, right? Anything that solves a problem, in if you have a talent in that area, is a way that you can get paid money. And then lastly, what do you have a lived experience in or as that can also be leveraged? So sometimes it's not just, again, these formal skills that we have that make what we have to offer something that is viable to be paid for, but sometimes it can be our actual lived experience. Like me being the child of an immigrant and being biracial and having lived abroad and um being a first generation college grad. Like these are all different unique experiences that then give me a unique positioning to the value add that I can offer to an organization or to an individual. And then lastly, under what does the world need? If that question feels overwhelming, you can also ask yourself, what causes are you most interested in or moved by? Different people have different things that they gravitate towards. Some people it's children, other people it's animals, it might be elderly, it might be homeless, it might be those dealing with cancer, but we often have certain causes that like tug at our heartstrings. Um, Usually connected to this is what volunteer experiences have you gravitated towards? So if you're taking the time to do something unpaid, to provide assistance or support or help, that's probably something that's working towards that broader question of what does the world need. And then lastly, what is one global or societal problem that you would like to see solved in your lifetime? That is another way of thinking about what does the world need, because obviously the world needs a ton of things, but kind of narrowing down where you feel you're most aligned to that solution. So hopefully those 12 sub questions help to give you a little bit more structure around how you could answer those four broader questions. And then what's also beautiful about the Ikigai model, right, is that the four questions that it poses offers this opportunity to kind of reflect on the relationships that exist between those answers. So by considering the questions in the diagram in pairs, we can actually better determine a potential mission, passion, profession, and vocation that will allow us to live out our purpose. So when you look at the intersection of what you love and what you're good at, that's where you're probably going to find your passion. Now, at the intersection of what you're good at and what you can be paid for, that's where you'll find your profession. At the intersection of what you can be paid for and what does the world need, that's where you'll find your vocation. And then at the intersection of what does the world need and what do you love, that's where you'll find your mission. Now, I want to be clear that these do not have to be mutually exclusive. It's not like, oh, I can only find a job where I'm working in my passion, or I can only do something in my profession or vocation or mission, right? In a perfect world, you'd be at the intersection. What you do for a living would be at the intersection of all four of these. However, to be honest with you, the majority of people probably don't get all four. So, does that mean we need to cry into our cereal bowls? No, it does not, because you can achieve your ikigai much more broadly than through the work that you do. Obviously, again, if you can, in an ideal world, like I feel very blessed that when I was a high school principal, I definitely felt like I was working in all four of my zones of joy, genius, income, and impact. And then, even now, as an entrepreneur, being able to consult with different organizations, I also feel like I am working in my zones of joy, genius, income, and impact. And so it's both a passion filled and purpose driven life that I'm living through my work. But even if I didn't have just the work, I have a broader way of tapping into those things. And so I want you to be open to understanding that if you feel like your current job or business doesn't hit full all four of these things, you can still achieve your ikigai. But what you're going to need to do is be able to identify where you can carve out space intentionally in your life where you can tap into and nurture and edify and honor these different parts of yourself. So now we're going to do a little bit more with some poll questions and some reflecting. So the first question I have for all of you is, do you see how your personal mission connects to your organizational mission? I do this with my clients all the time where I make them come up with their own personal mission statement, and then we kind of cross-reference the organizational mission and we see where those connections are and where that alignment is. that can do a lot to motivate yourself, right? And then the next question is, do you know what your interests are? And do you have an outlet for them? So don't be embarrassed. I've had so many clients where they're like, I honestly don't even remember what I enjoy or like or care for. Maybe it's because you're in that season of parenting where you just feel like you're a taxi cab driver for your kids' sporting events, or maybe you've been really busy caring for an aging parent, or whatever the reasons are. There's a million and one reasons why we completely lose ourselves. But getting a sense of where you're at with that. And then the third question to share in the poll is, does your current career exist at the intersection of a profession and a vocation? So it would be wonderful if you are using your gifts, right? What you're good at and getting paid for it. That's a profession. But it'd also be great if what you were being paid for felt like you were um, uh, providing support towards what the world needs, right? That you were meaningfully contributing to that. And so that's always, such an amazing feeling that I'm doing what I'm great at, I'm getting paid for it, and I'm making a difference. Like if you can have that trifecta, that's a beautiful place to kind of be in. Okay, we still have people answering these questions, but I'm taking a look at least at the first set of questions. So that first question of, do you see how your personal mission connects to your organizational mission? About 17% so far are saying I don't really see that connection. And then there's the biggest percentage so far say they see a slight connection, right? That's at 38%. 22% of you are saying at a moderate connection. And then right now, about 27% say either a strong connection or a very strong connection. So, yes, a little over a quarter of you, you're living the dream. You really feel like what you're passionate and, passionate about and what your purpose is feels very aligned to the work that you do. And again, if you're not there, I don't want you to throw your hands up. I'm going to talk about other ways that you might be able to shift where you are on that spectrum. For the second question, do you know what your passions are and do you have an outlet for them? Right. So there is the highest so far is 29%. Like that category of honestly, I don't even know or remember what I'm passionate about. Right. Then there's another almost quarter of you, 24% say, like, I know what they are. I know what my passions are. I just rarely get to pursue them. Then the next is 21%. So this is actually in descending order. Say that you know what your passions are and you do pursue them, just not as much as you'd want to. 15% and 10% respectively say that you are that you know what they are and that you're able to do it either regularly or you actually are, it's embedded in almost everything that you do. So again, about a quarter of you are living the dream, and the rest of you there's room for improvement. And so again, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what that could look like. And then our last question here is about, where does your current career or business exist when it comes to this intersection of profession and vocation? And so we have about 14% say, I'm not living in either, right? I'm not even making money in the thing that I'm good at or the thing that I feel like is contributing to the world meaningfully. Then you have the majority of you are at that 36% of you feel like you're in that profession. You're in a profession. You're getting paid for something that you're good at, but not necessarily doing work that feels like it's contributing in the way that you want it to serving what the world needs. 19% of you, it's the flip-flop area where you're like, I'm doing something that feels like I'm contributing meaningfully to the world, but maybe not using and leveraging and maximizing the gifts and talents that I have. And then again, we got 31% of you, almost a third of you in that unicorn space where you're like, no, I actually am doing work based on what I'm good at and in a way that makes a difference. So I'm gonna end the poll here. Not quite everybody got there, but you know how the workday gets, you get interrupted. So sharing those results with you. And then this last question is more just a reflection. And if you want to share in the chat, I invite you to do so. But I would love for you to think about, what shifts can you begin to make that will bring you closer to experiencing your Ikigai? And so whether that means like, I'm going to start carving out more time to be able to pursue my hobbies or to rediscover what my passions even are. Or maybe for you, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't remember the last time I volunteered and did something just to be of service. Or maybe for some of you, it's like I want to go for a different role in my organization. Like I like the company that I work for, but I don't feel like I'm doing the work that best suits me, whether that's I'm not using my gifts and talents in the most optimal way, or whether it's I'm just not working in the area that feels as purpose driven to me. These are different things that you could go. You might go all the way to the other side where you're like, I actually don't even want to be in this industry anymore. Like I want to pursue something completely, totally different. Maybe you're going to go back to school. But think about, there's both little and big ways that you can start to try and move that needle. Okay. All right. So those were the results. I thought I had shared them before, but apparently I didn't. But okay, I'm going to stop the share now and we'll move on. Okay. So now let's get into some practicalities, connecting the dots, how you can enhance your own Ikigai. So the first is to simply discover or rediscover and pursue your passions, right? So, like I said, maybe it's taking a pottery class, maybe it's going for hikes in nature, whatever it might be. Second is to do an inventory again of all of your diverse skills and to find outlets for them. So sometimes, like I said in the beginning when we were brainstorming those different questions, don't think of just your professional skills. Like, what are broader skills? Like, maybe you're an awesome baker and you know what? You could actually start a side hustle doing baking, or you could, every quarter volunteer to bake things for your kids' school, for the PTA, for the fundraiser, or whatever. But finding ways that you can first identify the skill sets and then making sure that you're finding a way to actually use those skills. Third is you can identify the skills that can advance promotions or again create side hustles. So other things that you're really good at that you need to be a little bit more vocal about, the fact that you have those skills, or finding ways that you can demonstrate those skills so that you can be using that to leverage a way to advance in terms of, going for a promotion or something like that. Or can you create side hustles? A lot of my entrepreneurial clients that I have had full-time, W-2 jobs, and they started to build out, whether it's like a consulting practice on the side. And then as they built that big enough that it could actually, meet or exceed their existing salary, then they were able to switch. So you never know how you can use your skills in a different way. Four, we can establish ways to regularly give back. Again, the cadence is going to be based on your own stage of life and what you've got to juggle, but it's important. So maybe it's not volunteering every day and every week, or maybe even every month, but maybe it's like volunteering quarterly, so you get a regular cadence of feeling like you're giving back in a meaningful way. Number five, you can determine again your personal mission and the org's mission and the connection between the two. And then lastly, you can connect with others seeking their Ikigai for deeper community. I have definitely found that, as I continue on this journey of life, I constantly want to be around other people who are seeking to have this ever elevated existence, right? Because they inspire me, they motivate me, they keep me accountable. So being in community with other people who have a similar goal to, achieve and enhance their Ikigai is only going to increase the probability that you will actually follow through yourself. Now, thinking about this more broadly and connecting the dots, how leaders can leverage Ikigai. So, a lot of times, this is actually my most popular talk for organizations, which might seem weird because you're like, why would an organization want to share this with their employees? But it's because people who, again, have that personal and professional connection, they're going to be more dedicated. You're going to be able to retain them. And it's about figuring out ways that, again, you might be able to leverage your top talent in ways that you might not have already thought of. So, first, you can include Ikigai in the onboarding. So, even if you're not in HR, just when you get a new team member, you can set up that one-to-one meeting where you're getting them acclimated to the different policies and practices, but you can also carve out some space to ask them these four core questions, or have it in a survey form where people can write about it and you can simply read about it and just know it and be able to leverage that information as needed. Two is connecting work to the mission. So when you know somebody's mission, their personal mission, that intersection of what they love and what the world needs, then you can be able to speak to how your organization or the role that they serve in connects to that. And again, that creates that deeper connection and enthusiasm to the work. Third, you can identify additional untapped skills. So you might not realize that somebody has these various skills that are outside of their normal job. Like somebody might be an extremely good writer, even if what they do in the job is accounting, and you might be able to use that skill for a newsletter or something. Four is you can provide opportunities for more visibility. If you know the skill sets that somebody has, right, what they're good at, and the way that they want to be contributing, but they're not having as many of those opportunities to showcase that, you can now then create those opportunities for your team, which is obviously, again, going to increase that sense of dedication and loyalty, and will often contribute to better retention. And then five, we have offer community service days. So have days, a lot of organizations have opportunities where employees can collectively come together to work on a particular community service and to contribute in a meaningful way. And again, that's a great way to build team camaraderie while also doing good in your community. And then lastly, you can incorporate different Ikigai shares in meetings, right? So you can have people share, like, oh, what's something that you did this week that is something that you love, right? And like it's almost like giving them a homework assignment the week before. Say, like, next week's meeting, we want to make sure that everybody did at least one thing that kind of filled up their cup with something that they love. So again, these are different ways that a leader could use and leverage Ikigai to increase that employee engagement, to increase that sense of fulfillment from work. And then lastly, how Ikigai can enhance your ERGs. So these are employee resource groups. Many employee resource groups might be, ones that are based on like race. They might be based on gender. They might be based on life stage, like working parents. There's also ERGs that are rooted in a common interest. So one is rooting the ERG in a common interest. It could be, like I said, it could be the Black and African American ERG or Asian American ERG. It could be female women's ERG. I've seen working parents ERGs. I've seen runners ERGs. Like the organization has employees going on runs together. So that's a way to tap into what people love. Next, you have leveraging members' expertise and skills. Again, I talked about sometimes people have skill sets that are outside of their regular job. So let's go back to that person who might be an accountant in their day job, but maybe they are really awesome at graphic design and they can use that Canva platform and create different flyers, and they could create those materials for the ERG. So that's allowing that person to tap into that skill set that they have in a way, something that they're good at in a way that they wouldn't normally otherwise be able to do on the job and get that sense of fulfillment. Third, we have enhance member capacity to advance. So sometimes, a lot of times in ERGs, like I'll get asked to come in to talk to a women's ERG, and they're providing their female employees with different skills on how they can better advance through the organization. And so that's another way that an ERG can help somebody to answer that question of what can I be paid for, right? And then four, we have provide opportunities for greater service. I already talked about how some ERGs are actually just a service ERG, a community service ERG. So that is another way to answer that question of what does the world need? And then five, you can use the ERG to tie again the organization and personal missions and passions so people understand that relationship. And then lastly, ERGs can create a platform for that deeper community because again, people are answering or pursuing those different elements of Ikigai through the ERG itself. Okay, so we've gone through the meat and potatoes of today's talk, and this is now taking it from the micro into the macro. So, what is my Solarized leadership model, and why did I create it? Essentially, I looked at much of traditional leadership paradigms, and I saw that most of them were very much hierarchical, steeped in a lot of the isms, really based on a scarcity model and a toxicity. And I really wanted to create something that would be both the antithesis and the antidote to these things. And so I came up with four major elements. And the first one is satisfaction. So this is all about increasing people's pride, joy, and fulfillment in the work that they do and the lives that they live. And why satisfaction was a critical element for me is because I think many of us were told what we should do. Or, oh, you're good at this thing, so you should go for this job. Oh, it's very safe, it's very secure. And then we sometimes wake up and we're like, I don't even know how I got here or why. Like I'm not really satisfied. And it's I know for me there's an extra layer being the child of an immigrant. My mother is very utilitarian in her spirit. And so she kind of implicitly instilled in me this idea of like there always has to be like a purpose for anything that I'm doing, and that purpose can't just be for joy or for that pride or that fulfillment. And so I think if you can tap your leadership into helping people to feel that satisfaction, again, that's going to result in better retention and better employee engagement and better sense of satisfaction and well-being. Next is optimism. So optimism is all about improving your outlook on what's possible and your capacity to rise and excel. And for me, this is a huge component of strong leadership, because if we're going to have these ambitious goals and this audacious vision, we are inevitably going to confront obstacles, challenges, failures, mistakes, and we really need to be able to have that greater sense of hope around what is possible so that we can persevere and have that resilience. Next, we have UAlbany. Now, mind you, I was an English major and an English teacher, and don't feel bad if you don't know what the word UAlbany is. I didn't know what the word UAlbany was until I was looking for a U word that would fit this acronym. And it basically is a very antiquated word for abundance, and I am desperately trying to revive it back into the everyday lexicon. And this is about embodying a spirit of abundance and assuming that there's provision for whatever is needed. Now, I don't want to discount or dismiss that having physical resources, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's the more people, that these things can help us to succeed faster or better. But I think sometimes we miss, what do we do have? Like, what do we have? Like, whether it's the intellectual capital, the human capital, the strategic partner capital, whatever resources, existing resources that we have, how do we maximize those even as we pursue other additional resources that we want to acquire? And then lastly, we have this idea of love. So, love is about igniting your passion and purpose by infusing the most universal element of the human condition. And while I recognize that for many, when I first introduced the Solarized leadership concept, they were like, I don't think you can say love or soul in a school or a hospital or a bank or a law firm. But I think, again, post pandemic, folks are really understanding that this idea of leaving your personal life at the door is not only not really feasible, it's not healthy. And actually, love is one of the greatest drivers. If you think about the smallest thing within an individual's life, or even on a global scale, the biggest achievements have been for the love of something, whether it was the love of a person, the love of a country, the love of a cause. It's a driving force. And so that's why these four elements were there. Before I continue, I see there's a hand up. Does somebody want to share?
Hi, Christina. I don't think that we're going to be able to respond to the hand raises, but if anybody wants to put a question in the Q&A feature, we do have one that I'm going to ask you at the end. But if you do have a question, I would suggest somebody place it in there instead of raising their hand.
Okay, wonderful. And then, so I'm not going to go deep into this, but I know I just showed the Solarized leadership model and the 4 elements. It's all sounds lovely, very esoteric, but here's where we actually operationalize it. So the Solarized leadership model consists of 2 frameworks. There's the optimized framework, which is all about personal flourishing, and then the ascend framework, which is about professional flourishing. So that optimized framework is about activating, cultivating, and aligning a sound mind, a strong body, and a sage spirit. And again, it's not about me trying to be anybody's therapist or personal nutritionist or trainer or spiritual guru, but what I focus on is helping people to develop this rhythm, right, of the resources, routines, and rituals in these areas that will allow them to nurture and edify and honor these different facets of themselves so that you show up whole and intentional and energized, and you kind of possess this peace and joy that transcends circumstance. So that when we focus the majority of our time in the ascent framework, which is about that individual and organizational professional flourishing, here we do this through enlightening the head, engaging the heart, and empowering the hands. So it's this idea that, of course, everybody and every organization is this combination of head, heart, hands. But we tend to have default modes. So if you're a head person, your entry point into the work is data, theory, stats, research, numbers. If you're a heart person, it's not that you can't do those things or don't do those things or won't do those things, but that's not what drives you. You want to know what's the personal transformation, what's the community impact, how does this actually improve my team's dynamic so we can achieve the mission and vision? And then lastly, for empower the hands, we if you're a hands person, you're more about what's the tactical support that needs to be in place so that we can shift from theory to practice and actually be able to implement the initiative. And so as leaders, we want to get to that place where we have a more equilateral triangle. But also as an organization, I tend to think of head as strategy, heart as culture, and hands as operation. So how are we bringing the 3 of these things to synergize everything so that we can, again, maximize impact? And as it relates to the discover your ikigai would fall into that category of the sound mind and establishing your purpose. And when you have that sense of purpose, it can inform the way the head, heart, and hands work together. And this is also another tool that I use. It's called my Flourish Flower. It's based on the uh, Harvard School of Public Health's Flourishing Index and my partner's Kaisang method. And it's just a more holistic and human-centered approach to thinking about wellness and well-being. And so we look at these 8 elements of finances, which is the degree to which you feel financially secure, leisure, which is the degree to which you're able to integrate rest and recreation. Occupation is the degree to which you feel fulfilled from your work. So obviously, Ikigai is touching upon that. Unity is like your spiritual health. It's the degree to which you feel connected to source, however you define source. Relationships, that's the degree to which you possess those close ties with others. Impact is broader, right? Again, tapping into that Ikigai more broadly, it's knowing and living out your purpose. Sanity is like your mental health. It's the degree to which your mind is cared for, clear, and free. And then health is like your physical health. It's the degree to which your body is cared for and functioning. And so, when it comes to your flourish flower, it may look like something like this. And what I like to do with my clients is every quarter we do a self assessment on where do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10. And there's something nice about the visual because you can see like what petals look like they're in full bloom, what petals look like they're about to die off the vine. And then you can decide, like, I'm going to focus maybe on 1 or 2 of these flourish flower elements for that quarter to improve. And because these are so interconnected, often, even if you focus on 1 or 2, you'll start to see some of the others also gain some traction. And so, again, connecting to this to the Discover Your Ikigai this is a way to help yourself and your employees or your colleagues to be able to experience more holistic flourishing through the work that they do and the lives that they live outside of their work. And then lastly, again, I'm not going to touch too much here, but the work that I do when it comes to wellness, inclusion, diversity, and equity, we again are looking for that individual and organizational flourishing. And we ask 4 core questions at the intersection. So, what are different ways to thrive is a way to redefine what is success, and also how do we connect organizational goals and strategic priorities to wellness, inclusion, diversity, and equity initiatives so that they function both as a lens by which to look at the world, not just look at the world, but look at the different organizational goals and strategic priorities, every department, every role and responsibility, but also using those wide initiatives as a vehicle to drive the innovation to achieve those goals. At the intersection of wellness and inclusion is how do we care for ourselves and others? So again, you can see how the Ikigai can connect to that, because caring understanding about your own sense of purpose is what contributes to you being able to be well and to care for both yourself and for others. When you're engaging in those activities that fill your cup, whether it's through things that you love doing or whether it's contributing to what the world needs, you can be reaffirming that. We also talk about how can we elevate outcomes for all, right, which is getting this sense of understanding how people's different intersections of identity affect the way that they are perceived and how they navigate the world. And by pursuing your ikigai, you can help yourself. And again, if you're promoting this for your employees or your team, this allows them to be able to pursue and achieve their goals and elevate those outcomes for all. And then lastly, at the intersection of diversity and equity, we have this core question of what initiatives will maximize impact, which is a way of being able to kind of do that organizational needs assessment on the personal level, individual level. You can do your own needs assessment and then identify what are your key priority areas and then pursue create goals around that and to pursue that. And then lastly, this is just a tool that I use daily. I call it Take Aim at Your Goals. I start with an affirmation each day. So this is about making a declaration about yourself that roots you in your power and amplifies your belief. So you might say something like, I am the protagonist of an epic story in the making. It's internally facing. The intention is a way to set a way of being that describes how you want to show up in the world. So you might set this intention of, I want to be a beacon of hope for the hopeless. So this is externally facing. And then the milestone or milestones is when you establish something to achieve that advances and accelerates you towards your goals. For example, I will create the agenda for the upcoming conference. So you can also think of affirmation, intention, and milestone as a version of head, heart, and hands happening in real time. And so if there's any questions, I know we can't unmic people, but in the Q&A section, if there's anything, I'm happy to address that.
Christina, this was such wonderful information. I know personally for me, I found the Ikigai 4 core principles really affirming, and also the how you connected the dots on how we could do this personally and then both as leaders. I really, really valued that part of your session. There is one question that's pretty specific, so I'm going to make it a little bit more broader for other
Sure.
people. You started your own consulting business, and so how did you get started finding clients? Like, do you have any tips for anybody who might be starting their own entrepreneur?
Yes, yes. So one of the primary ways that I work with my entrepreneurial clients is doing work around what I call your fortune framework. So a signature framework, and a signature framework basically has your 3 Ps. It's your promise, it's your paradigm, and it's your process. So your promise is kind of being able to articulate what is it that your prospective clients could anticipate experiencing or achieving as a result of working with you? And then you want to be able to have your paradigm, which goes into like what needs to be in place basically for them to get to that to get to that achievement or outcome. And so this is basically like the lens by which you're looking at the world. Is how you're identifying the problems and coming up with those solutions. And then the process is getting more into the methodology, so being able to
Okay.
say, how am I getting them to that transformation? But making sure that you keep that conceptual and not tactical, because the tactical is what they pay you for. And so when it comes to how do you find the client, so when you have a fortune framework, so I shared with y'all my Solarized leadership model, and those 2 frameworks of the optimized framework and the ascend framework, that allows my prospective clients to understand my 3 Ps. Again, very broadly, that can be incorporated into my website, social media posts, like it's the different marketing collateral, my brochures, Once you have that, then you can move and have if the marketing collateral is working, you're going to get some sales calls. And the sales calls, you're using the framework again to walk people through what's the philosophy, what distinguishes me, but connecting the philosophy to specific products and services that people can actually pay you for, and then embedding client results within that so they understand that, like, when people work with you, this is what happens. And then, assuming the sales call goes well, then you're going to get the client engagement, and then you can use the framework for the actual client delivery. And when it comes to, again, more broadly, how do we find those clients? I have another. If you notice, I love acronyms and and alliteration, but my 5 P's is know your purpose. So figuring out what it is that you're trying to sell. Once you have the purpose down, think about the platforms. Like, where is it? Digital platforms, virtual platforms like LinkedIn, or are you going to go to actual networking events? Then thinking about partners, having ideal partners that you might want to work with. I joke, it's kind of like when you were applying to college, like you want to have some reach organizations, some meet organizations, and then some safety organizations. And then once you identify those organizations you'd want to work with, find out who are the people. What are is there a chief human resources officer you want to talk to? Is it the CEO? Is it the learning and development lead? Whatever is aligned to who would be the most aligned person to talk with. And then lastly is having a plan. Like, how are you actually going to engage with those folks? So that's very high level, broad, but that's how I would recommend.
That's wonderful. I'm mindful of everybody's time, but there is one last question I think we could ask before we head out, and
Absolutely.
that is, how do you balance your time, as you mentioned, being the sandwich generation, both with young toddlers that might need your attention or with aging parents that need some attention? How do you encourage people to find their purpose when they're in between?
Yeah. So first, it's having grace with yourself and
Hmm.
understanding that there are seasons of life. And so I wholly reject the idea of work-life balance. I just please never say that around me or ever again to anyone. I think it's actually a very gaslighty term. And I've heard work-life integration, which is a little bit better, but still feels sterile. We talk about work-life harmony. So think
Mm.
about even music. There's different times where it feels more like frenetic, and there are times where it's maybe more like a waltz, and like just knowing that that isn't giving yourself that grace. Also, though, I think it's about figuring out like what your priorities are in this season, right? So maybe it's like, because I have a toddler and I want to like cherish these moments, that I'm going to decelerate myself somewhere else. Or if you're like, no, I'm every woman, I can have it all, I want to do all the things, you can do that. But then again, you're going to have to structure it. So for me, my calendar is my best friend. Sometimes it feels like my worst enemy, but it's my best friend, because if I schedule it in there, it's more likely that it's going to happen. Having accountability, like if you can have a coach, that's great, but you don't always have to, maybe that's not in the budget right now. Who's a best friend or a colleague that's on a similar mission, that like you can be each other's accountability partners? I know that during the pandemic, I had a mommy pod with somebody where I would take the kids one day a week. She would take the kids one day a week. And then they were in like preschool, so it was like I only had one day where I had to actually do the work with the kids. But because the kids were together, I was able to still get more done than when I just had mine by myself, because he had somebody to entertain him. Right. So it's getting creative, finding that community, and just being very intentional and strategic.
That's excellent advice. We really appreciate you being here with us today. We are going to make the recording available to everyone. I'm going to say it'll be available probably by Monday.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry. I forgot to
please.
add this slide. If you want, this QR code should bring you, if everything went right, should bring
Mhm.
you to a survey that you can fill out. And then it will allow me to send you a high level summary of the talk. And there's different ways that we can stay connected.
Excellent. I'll make sure that I pull down that QR code and include it with the email message with the recording for everybody.
Perfect.
So again, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Appreciate having you here with us. And yes, this is your contact information, so we'll make sure we get this out to everybody.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so much again for the opportunity.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.